Meeting of the Orangeville Town Council for Monday, March the 21st. We'll start off with an approval of our agenda, please. Motion, please. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We are going to move into closed, and I'm going to read the recommendations here that a closed meeting of the council be held pursuant to Section 239-2 of the Municipal Act for the purposes of considering the following subject matters. 4.1, approval of the closed council meeting of February 28th, 2022. 4.2, a confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO. Public holders, town clerk, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 4.3, Ontario Senior of the Year Award, CAO Report 2022-004. 4.4, confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, town clerk, regarding committee appointments. 4.5, another report regarding committee appointments, report CPS 2022-015. And 4.6, a confidential verbal report from Jennifer Gone, Manager of Human Resources, public office holders, regarding a market salary review. May I have a motion to move into close, please? Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. We'll see you on the other link in a minute. are here to open our open session of Orangeville Council meeting for Monday, March 21st, 2022. We'd like to start with the singing of our national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to David Nairn, the Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville, and that listening to our national anthem is never more important than today when we have conflict in the world that we all wish would end soon. So our thoughts and prayers are with those in Ukraine right now, and let's hope that that conflict can be resolved as soon as possible. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name as part of the public record will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. We're going to rise and report based on the closed council session that just ended. We have a recommendation that the February 28, 2022 closed council minutes be approved, and that the confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO, public office holder, town clerk, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received, and that Ontario Senior of the Year Award, CAO 2022-004, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received, and that a confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, town clerk, regarding committee appointments regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received, and that committee appointments, CPS 2022-015, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received, and that the confidential verbal report from Jennifer Gone, Manager of Human Resources, Public Office Holders, Market Salary Review, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees and labor relations or employee negotiations, be received, and that Council has approved the new salary grid effective April the 1st, 2022. Can we have a motion to approve those items? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 10, this is adoption of minutes of previous council meetings. We have the March 3rd, 2022 special council meeting and the March 7th, 22 council minutes. Can we have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? All right, moving on to item 11, presentations, petitions, and delegations. I'd like to welcome Gagan Sandhu, the Manager of Public Works, Water Pollution Control Plant Performance Report. Mr. Sandhu, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. As everyone at the council can notice that up ahead in the agenda, there's two annual reports, one for the wastewater and one for the water. So we as staff thought that it's a good segue to present some things about the pollution control plant before council. Now, before I do that, I would like to ask council's permission to introduce Mr. John Denhood, Supervisor of Wastewater Operations for the town of Orangeville.
Please do. Mr. Denhood, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Hi, John. Okay, I'll try to share my screen here. Just give me a second. Okay, so taking this opportunity to present before council some key performance metrics and some general information about the pollution control plant. The way we have set up the slide is basically we'll be touching on 4 key things. The first one of them will be the pollution control plant layout itself. As you can notice in the annual report, there's some performance metrics that has been reported, and that we will be sending it to our regulator, the Ministry of Environment and Parks, within 90 days of December 31st last year. Some recent upgrades that have been performed at the pollution control plant in last year, 2021, and some exciting upcoming upgrades that are scheduled for the pollution control plant this year and next year. This is a Google snapshot of the pollution control plant. I'm pretty sure everyone must be familiar with it, but the way I've tried to explain the working of this plant or the journey of the wastewater through this plant before it makes its way to the Credit River, I tried to capture that, hoping that it is interesting for everyone. So at the start, we have the inlet structure where the influent or everything coming from the town's sanitary collection system enters the plant. Then we have what is called the anoxic zone. This is where the bulk of the removal of pollution in terms of nitrogen happens. Then we have then the flow goes through the aeration tanks. Basically, these are imagine the bubble coming out from the bottom of the tank, providing some aeration or providing some oxygen to help in the pollution removal process. And then it goes to the clarifier. Basically, the liquid wastewater is through a basic process of settling gets more dense. And after it gets dense, it gets separated 2 ways. The liquid goes through the chlorination stream, and the solid goes through the sludge handling process. So I won't proceed with the chlorination side of things. I will take you to the sludge handling side of things. So when the flow splits between liquid and solid, it goes to a thickening tank. And through the thickening tank, it goes through the digester, where it gets more thickened. There is a process which is happening in the digester. That process happens without oxygen. So the gist of that process is more thickening so that our product from the pollution control plant can be used as a product itself, not as a waste. So from the digesters, not all the time we haul all the dense sludge. We have holding capacity, so we keep our sludge into the holding tank for some time. And as I mentioned earlier, the flow split. So now we come back to the liquid part of the flow, where after chlorination, it goes through filtration, and then final dechlorination before it gets to the Credit River, because the ministry does not want any chlorinated water entering any water bodies or any water streams. And finally, we haul our product, which is the sludge. We have a good contract with a local hauler. Sometimes they process the sludge that they haul from us. Sometimes they have further contracts with the local landowners where they land apply our product, which is the sludge. It is basically a fertilizer. So performance metrics for 2021, you will note that in the following annual report also. The design capacity of our pollution control plant is 17,500 cubic meter. Average total daily flow for 2021 was 10,971 cubic meters per day. Receiving water is the Credit River. The population that is serviced is a little more than 30,221. The household that are served are a little more than 11,193. Good thing that happened or you can say good thing that did not happen in 2021 was we experienced no bypass. Our pollution control plant is rated the highest in terms of the way the ministry rate the plant. It's rated as wastewater treatment plant category 4. Last but not least, the report that will be following has been produced or created by in-house staff by Mr. John Denhood, and these are the staff members. So in terms of recent upgrades for 2021, we removed digester 1 roof. We got a new fixed roof. I was not there, but what I have heard from the plant operators, including Mr. Denhood, was the roof almost blew up, but we have a new fixed roof now. And as a result of our continuous optimization through our wastewater plant operators' efforts, you can notice the effluent going into the Credit River. You cannot notice any quality change when the effluent is released into the Credit River. And last but not the least, as part of the recent upgrades last year, there was some massive work done for inlet cleanout. Basically, the fats, oils, and grease were removed, and wipes, etc., were also removed from the intake structure. In terms of the upcoming upgrades for this year and next year, we are evaluating various options for the roof of digester number 2. So far, the consultant's analysis is pointing towards a fixed roof again, which is more in line with what we did for digester 1 a couple of years ago. As part of the upcoming upgrade, we are also evaluating various options for new digester mixing system. And so far, the analysis through our consultant is going to our hydraulic mixing. We are also reviewing existing pollution control plant digesting, mainly from the solid handling side of the things. We are good, or we have adequate capacity in handling the liquid side of the influent. If you remember, our flow through the plant split 2 ways. One is the liquid and the second is the solid. So we are comfortable from the liquid side of things, but we want to improve or leverage some more capacity on the solid handling side of things. And also, as part of this digester number 2 upgrade, we are evaluating that what we can do best for in terms of utilizing biogas. Right now, we are flaring up in the atmosphere. We have been discussing with the consultant to use the biogas that we produce to harness it for our boilers. We are not lucky that far, but we are comfortable that we'll be able to do it going forward, but we're still in discussions with our consultant for that. And we are aiming some massive upgrades in terms of SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. This is basically a GPS for the plant like this. It matches the operating technology with the information technology. The operators can get or receive proactive alarms, and they can act or react accordingly. Also, a big thing coming up for the pollution control plant is optimizing study, which is basically identifying any deficiencies in the processes and correcting them in terms of betterment of equipment, more enhanced processes. And these are some of the things that we still are thinking about including in the optimization study. How better we can remove the nitrogen, how better we can remove the phosphorus, be it through addition of some different substance. Right now we are adding alum. So what are the other options there in terms of any other material that can be added to remove phosphorus more effectively? Flow and loading capacities are there. As I said, we want to capture more of our solids digestion capacity, so we will be including that in the optimization study also. And last but not the least, how best to reduce the energy, the chemical use, and things like that. They also will be captured in the optimization study. And that is the end of my presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sandhu. As Mr. Koselleck has let me know that you definitely are number one in the number two business. So thank you, Mr. Sandhu. I have some questions here. Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Post. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good evening, Mr. Sandhu. I appreciate very much the amount of information that you have provided to us in this report. A lot of detail, and again, a lot to read. For those of us over the years who've maintained swimming pools, your world is a lot more complex when it comes to chlorine and pH balances. But at the same time, I was intrigued to review all of the work that you and your team do. And on behalf of not only council, but on behalf of our community, thank you for everything that you do to efficiently remove any of the waste that would be in that water. And of course, the effluent that goes into the Credit River, it's meeting the standards that you've identified. I did note in your report, and Your Worship, would this be a question to pose at this time or during the staff report? This is since Mr. Sandhu is here.
Maybe we should wait for the staff report, Mr. Andrews or Councillor Andrews. I think.
Sure. Okay, I'll do that at that time then. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My quick question was just how often do we perform optimization studies? When was our last one and how often do we expect to do them?
Mr. Sandhu.
So I am very new with the town, but whatever discussions I've been having with the staff here, the last was done in 2013 or 14 as part of the expansion when the town invested heavily into expanding the plant. And this new one that is on the books will basically be an enhancement of that previous study or a validation of that previous study.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Sandhu, I want to thank you for your very comprehensive report tonight and the attachments that we've all reviewed. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on here now on to our second presentation for tonight. We have Jesse Edmonds and Ryan Hancock of the Orangeville Minor Baseball Association. Gentlemen, how are you? Go Bengals.
Doing well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, and members of council and staff for your time tonight. Ryan, just making sure you're here as well. I know he had hockey tonight with his kids, so.
If I can interrupt you for a second, Mr. Sandhu, I still see your report up on our screen. I'm wondering if you could turn that off, please, sir. Thank you. Well, there we go. Hey, there we go. The Shack Revitalization Plan. Okay. Carry on, Mr. Edmonds and Mr. Hancock.
Yes, thank you, sir. So we've come to you tonight, Ryan and I, asking for your support for our request for financial assistance. We have filled out an application, and we have provided this plan as part of the agenda. I'm not sure if anybody had the chance to review it. It is a little bit lengthy, and I know that these things can be short. So we're really here tonight just to, again, ask for your support, but also answer any questions that you may have regarding our plan and the league itself. Just a brief overview when it comes to the Orangeville and Headwaters Minor Baseball Association. We do service between 500 and 800 members of the youth community here in town every year. We've experienced some significant growth over the last 5 years leading up to the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic was tough on lots of youth sports organizations, but we are trying to come back stronger than ever, and rebuilding the Shack is definitely something that we've been working towards. But just to take it back a little bit, in 2019, Orangeville and Headwaters Minor Baseball had an expansion to the executive, and we brought on a lot of key roles to try and take the league to the next level. As some of you know, we've been trying to work with the town to improve baseball facilities. We have had year-over-year growth, not only in our house league registration, but with our representative teams. And part of what we're looking to do now is to really give back to the community, get more involved in the community, and the ways that we can do that are hosting tournaments in town. Tournaments, I do believe, for a lot of the youth sports organizations is an untapped resource. When you bring 12 to 16 teams from out of town to Orangeville, it can be great for local business, local small business. So we're really trying to work towards that. And like I said, I think it's a great opportunity. We see it as an opportunity. I know I've spoke with some of you about that as well. But in saying that, the one thing that the OHMBA doesn't have is a home. The Shack has always been known as kind of the building for baseball, but it, I believe, was built in the early 80s, and it's probably fair to say that it hasn't had a significant renovation done to it or any significant work done to it since. So anybody that was around when it was built, it probably looks the same way it did back then. So again, we're here. We're trying to renovate the Shack, and part of that too is rebranding the Shack. Funny enough, it was a member of town staff when we started talking about this that said, "Do you still call it the Shack?" I mean, it kind of gives you that name that it's kind of broke down. We still make it work, but a rebranding is what we're looking at doing, and we're going to engage our community and kind of get creative and have a naming contest for it, and there will be a giveaway as part of that. We've put together 2 budgets for the Shack renovation. One of them is a standard renovation of the main floor, and then the second renovation or second budget is actually to add a second level. Part of the problem that we have with the growth that we've experienced with the league is equipment storage. And for the last 3 years, we've actually been renting storage from a third party in town. So those are funds that right now go out from the league to have to pay for that. And by adding a second floor, it would actually give us the amount of storage that we need as the league continues to grow. But it would also give us a space where we could enhance the experience for our members. It would act as a home, as an office, but it could also act as a announcer booth for the teams that are playing at that little diamond there. And I mean, I grew up playing the game, and when you get your name called out on the PA when you're coming up to bat, it's a pretty cool experience. So that adding the second floor would give us that. Again, give us a place to celebrate Hall of Fame accolades, and also somewhere to celebrate our sponsors, and to be quite honest, somewhere to host league meetings, because again, with no current home, we have nowhere to meet. We've met at different businesses. For a while, we shared an office with Orangeville Hockey in the arena, but baseball's not an arena sport. right? So we're kind of hoping to have our own place. These are some very simple design drawings. We are actually finalizing our drawings with a local architect that was recommended to us by the building department for the town of Orangeville. And actually the drawings were finalized today, so we will be putting in our application for a building permit for this. And really, this slide here gets you to the point that we're here to talk about, and that's funding. I am happy to announce that as of today, we have Brackett Auto Group has become part of this shack renovation, as well as Absolute Insurance. We are teaming up with the Rotary Club and supporting RibFest from a volunteer perspective, and in turn, they will be sponsoring the shack renovation. The new owner of Orangeville Home Hardware has come forward and agreed to be a part of this. Details on that are still to be confirmed, but we do expect that it will likely be a material donation, which also helps bring that budget way down for us. And we are waiting for the end of this month to potentially have the involvement of the Lions Club as well. So we're engaged in the community. We have some other feelers out, but those are the sponsor side of things, or the donation side. We're also looking to launch a raffle this summer through our website. There's a third-party company called Rafflebox, and they are legitimized through the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, proper raffles. So we're looking to set that up. And we also have a GoFundMe page that has been started for this as well. The last source of funding that we are looking at and exploring is private lending or some sort of short-term loans, but we are hesitant towards that because with this being a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization, being tied to a long-term financial commitment isn't always in the best interest. You know, things can change year over year, so we are looking at that, but we are hoping that our efforts through sponsorship and fundraising will pay off. As I mentioned, we have different opportunities. We are, again, asking the town, requesting $15,000 through our application for financial assistance. We have been looking at the Trillium Foundation grants. Unfortunately, we did miss the deadline for the one that would be applicable to us right now, but we will be exploring that when it comes back around to us as well. So I mentioned the GoFundMe. Our timeline really is looking at right now finalizing and securing our sponsors and funding. And really the reality is if we only get to the point right now where we can do the main floor renovation, then we'll look to do that now and continue to raise funds to be able to add the second floor to the building. We really would like to see that happen. That may push our timeline out. It would be our hope to get the main floor renovated before our season starts towards the end of May. But again, in an ideal world, we would be doing the full-on second floor addition as well. In summary, really, this is a pretty significant endeavor for our league. It is something that is long overdue. Revitalizing the shack will continue to allow us to have a space for local high school students to get their volunteer hours as well, because our snack bar is run by volunteers. And we really do hope that you will consider supporting our cause, and appreciate your time very much tonight.
Very good.
If anybody has any questions?
Mr. Edmonds, thank you. As you know, council has been supportive of the baseball community. We've added significant monies to the budget this year for renovation of your fields. As far as the community grant application, we'll be talking to that in an upcoming report tonight. One quick question before I get to Councillor Andrews and Councillor Sherwood. This would be to Mr. Hancock. So baseball players have walk-up songs, and I'm just wondering, what would Jesse Edmonds' walk-up song be, Mr. Hancock? Come on, you got 1,000 of them in your head. I know you do.
You got to unmute, Ryan.
You're muted, Ryan. You're muted, Ryan. Sorry, buddy.
No, I've heard he's pretty good with the mic normally, but
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, I just thought, you've worked with Jesse for many years now. I'm just wondering what you thought the good walk-up song for him would be.
I think "Bad to the Bone" probably be a good
Bad
one.
to the Bone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesse has been extremely good for this organization since he's taken back over, and I'm just along for the ride. So thank you so much again, though, for everybody for putting the time in, looking to these reports, and hopefully helping us out. But I did, if I could just say something really quickly, it's that we really would like to have, if we can get to the second floor, that would be great. But as Jesse said before, we don't really have a center that is just about baseball and about building our culture, right? And when you go to a hockey rink, you can see all the banners everywhere. You can see everything. There's culture, there's history. There's a long history of baseball in this town, but there's just nowhere to really celebrate that because all our stuff's outside in fields and everything. So it would be just a huge improvement for us, the town, and I think it would draw more people and then, of course, more tournaments. So just thank you again for taking the time for this.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Edmonds, Mr. Hancock. I'm going to ask Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Sherwood for your comments or questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is certainly a hard question to follow up on the walk-up song. But Mr. Edmonds and Mr. Hancock, so nice to see you. And again, I'm a big fan of your organization, and I really agree with your comment, Mr. Hancock, regarding a calling card. You know, the organization has a lot of incredible history in our community, and to have a place that you can end up recognizing it, and also for your executive to plan things and all of the above, I think it's very important. Really like the plan that you've put forth, and I know that we'll be discussing this a little bit later in the community grant piece on our agenda, but I like the idea of, the announcer booth. Again, a little bit of my background was, in fact, doing some stadium announcing, and so I think it really ends up playing to, of course, the home team's advantage sometimes, but the opportunity to, of course, provide that thrill with announcing somebody that's coming up to bat, or someone who's, of course, made a great play outfield. The one question I have is, in fact, on that second floor, and I know that it is part of this proposal. One thing I did see an absence of was, in fact, sound system. Do you have a kind of a ballpark idea of what that would entail? I do, but I just thought, has that been something that you're investigating, or you've left that second floor kind of open for a variety of purposes?
Yeah, I think as far as hooking up a sound system, obviously with if we were doing it from scratch, we can run all the wiring and stuff like that in advance. But we would have to look into the best speaker systems and stuff that are meant for outside. So you want to make sure that we have the proper system, that we won't have to ever have issues with it. And then that would just be involving some shopping around. The price on music equipment right now is kind of gone through the roof, kind of like everything else. So whether that would be looking into something used, which there's plenty of, looking for, or potentially getting some of it donated, that would be kind of the next step. But right now we're kind of more focused on just getting it there. I have enough, I think, connections in the industry that I could probably make it happen. Yeah. So that would be ideal.
And just pertaining to that, I know that in our other facilities, for example, Mr. Edmonds referenced our hockey facilities, and where we have a sound system that is already in those facilities, Alder as well as Tony Rose. And I'm wondering, and again, not to put Mr. Osmond on the spot in any way, that would be something that would be probably as part of the involvement of this, but looking at maybe some form of collaboration regarding the utilization of equipment, because again, I'm not sure if that is town-owned, or league owned or league supported, but that may be something that part of this development may be part of the discussion at some point. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here tonight. And again, you got a big fan in this seat, that's for sure.
Well, I was thinking you can have the job as the announcer if you want it. You got the voice.
Those days may be over, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through your worship, to Mr. Edmonds and Mr. Hancock, thank you very much for coming tonight. My children spent many a year playing baseball, so I'm glad to see you bring this forward. I will admit that back in the 80s and 90s, the shack was utilized by us many times and mostly for the washroom. So it's very important that those washroom facilities be used. And again, I'm in great support of this because you guys are just as vital as our hockey, soccer, lacrosse, organizations within town. So one of the things I may have missed in your presentation is this just for youth only, or do you have any adult leagues?
We don't have an adult league, but one of the things we have been working on over the last few years is better collaboration between minor baseball and slow pitch and ladies 3-pitch. And really, because at the end of the day, it's about building a strong baseball community in Orangeville, not just about the youth side, but also the adult side as well. So we don't offer it. We offer baseball up to the age of 22. That's what Ontario Baseball Association is regulated for. At one point, there was a senior or adult baseball team that existed here in town that unfortunately did fold a couple of years ago. But our hope is that this generation that is growing up, that if we can keep these kids here, that eventually we will see that senior team here in Orangeville again as well.
That's great. And again, just not to age myself and how long I've been here, but I do remember that shack being built, and yeah, it's in bad need of some makeover.
100%.
Yeah, we actually tried to have somebody, a kind of semi-professional cleaning company, come in to work on the bathrooms during the last year's lockdown year, and they just couldn't do it. They said it was out of their scope. And it needs a lot of work. And we brought in porta potties this season just to have something for people in the park. And unfortunately, with porta potties, there's always a chance of somebody messing around. Or in one case, we had a bad windstorm there that knocked them over. And we'd like to avoid using those at all possible. So getting a nice, proper bathroom in for people to use is key.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Taylor, and then Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess I just want to thank Mr. Edmonds and Mr. Hancock for this. Mr. Edmonds in particular has been all over me for 2 years now. And your tenacity and your professionalism is really, I'm very thankful for it. And I of course will be supporting this. And you were very kind to mention all of the other organizations, and I'm well aware of them that have come forward to help you. But I just feel like I must, just because of my personal connection, but your contractor also is donating his time. And I think it's important that people know that as well, that there's no money being exchanged there with this. So I just wish you both well, and my wife will certainly appreciate having that shack looked after. It really is long past due. So thank you so much for your leadership in our town.
I appreciate that, Todd. I will say yes. AJ or AC Custom Renos, they actually stepped forward right at the beginning of this and said, listen, we want to help you guys. My time will be free. Obviously, there is some labor component baked into that budget, but that is because he has subcontractors that work underneath him. The great thing about AJ is this has been fluid the entire time. We see those budgets and those numbers at what they are, but the reality is that if we have volunteers that are willing to come forward and help with the build of this as well, AJ is fully on board with that. There is certain things, the plumbing and the electrical, that he would like to make sure are done by his licensed subcontractors. But a lot of the other work, the demolition that would have to take place, because of his generosity and his willingness to work with us, we will be able to work those budget numbers down, which should help us get to completion of this project. So.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Just as a side note, you had mentioned that you run a snack bar with volunteers. Just a thought, I know I'm a board member at Community Live in Dufferin, and they provide this service. I don't think it's any cost to you. They supply the food and snacks, whatever, and they would man the booth sort of thing. So I don't know if it's something you want to look into. Mr. Osmond knows all the facts on that, and it would just save you having to supply volunteers. But again, just a side note. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Andy.
All right. If there's no further questions, I want to thank Mr. Hancock and Mr. Edmonds for their presentation tonight. And we'll look forward to speaking further to the community grant application a little later in our agenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All the best.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving on. I just got a note from our clerk. We need to add a note to our previous reporting out of the Horizon report. We have to add that we are also including that staff proceed as directed. So I just wanted to add that on. We forgot to mention those specifics during that, but council, if you're in agreement, we'll have the clerk add that on as part of the minutes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to staff reports, 12.1. This is a 2021 annual performance report for the Orangeville Water Pollution Control Plant. There's a recommendation that report INS ENV 2022-018, the 2021 annual performance report for the Orangeville Water Pollution Control Plant, be received, and that staff presentation for the WCP performance for 2021, recent upgrades and upcoming upgrades for the WPCP be received. Can I have a motion on that, please? Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Andrews. Is there any further questions or comments, councillors, on this? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I had mentioned earlier on when Mr. Sandhu had
yes.
presented, I did want to just ask a very quick question. Mr. Sandhu, you had in that report, and I think it was on page 46 of the report regarding non-compliance. For the sake of layperson's terms and understanding, could you just provide a little bit of clarity to it? It would be, I think, very helpful for myself, but also the general public who may be watching this meeting virtually.
Mr. Sandhu.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councillor Andrews, I will have Mr. John Dunhood answer this question, please. John.
Yes. Good evening. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councillor Andrews. Yeah. So there's basically like a license, or kind of like a driver's license for operating the water pollution control plant. It's called a ECA, or Environmental Compliance Act, and so in that there's a whole bunch of different rules and different items that we need to follow, and some of them pertain to the quality of the water. As you already noted, it's called effluent, which is the water that's leaving the plant, and so there's a range for different elements, whether it be nitrogen, phosphorus, or a number of other parameters. And so we're given an objective that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks would like us to get to typically be below or within a range. And then there's a compliance limit, which basically is in my own terms would be like a speeding ticket, if you will. Now, typically, we need to report if one of those limits would be outside of compliance. We report that. Those are all typically on monthly averages. So we, at different times throughout a week, would take samples and send them to a lab. We do a lot of in-house sampling and analysis as well. And we make process adjustments. As Mr. Sandhu referred to, different portions of the plant definitely run by the use of microbiology. And so there's a lot of work and effort put into trying to grow and culture the right biology. And at different times, we have difficulties, and the plant does very well, but periodically there's times where we're either out of objective or out of compliance, and those are reported then to the ministry and also included in our annual report. If that answers your question, Councillor Andrews.
very much so. And again, I truly commend all of the work that you and the team do there. It is very complex, and it is much more complicated than just chlorine and pH balances in a swimming pool. It is, and I've had the pleasure of being on site there. So again, I truly admire the work that the team does there. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews, and thank you, Mr. Denhood, for that explanation. So we have a motion on the floor to receive this report. All in favor? Thank you, councillors. Moving on to 12.2. This is a 2021 Annual Summary Waterworks Report, INS 2022-2021. It's a recommendation that this report be received and that the 2021 Summary Report for Orangeville Drinking Water System be received, and that a copy of the 2021 Summary Report for the Orangeville Drinking Water System be forwarded to Credit Valley Conservation. May I have a motion for this, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any questions or comments, councillors, on this item? No? All in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on to 12.3, this is a 2021 Annual Building Permit Report, INS 2022-019. It's a recommendation that this report, the Annual Building Permit Report, be received. May I have a motion on that, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any questions, councillors, on this report? No, just a comment from me. It's good to see lots of activity. I know typically this department is operated on a cost recovery system. I noticed that we did have to dip into some reserves here. Explanation provided to me early today by staff was that there is a surplus in this department. It's used to even out the cost, so to speak, from year to year. And last year, being a year of the pandemic, building permit applications were down a little bit, resulting in fewer dollars received for income for that department. All right, all in favor? Very good. Moving on to 12.4, Cache Developments Orangeville Inc. Blocks 94 and 98, Plan 7M-70, the Ontario Land Tribunal approval. A recommendation that this report of Cache Developments Orangeville Inc. Be received, and that in accordance with the Tribunal's approval in principle of the applications under appeal with the Ontario Land Tribunal, and consistent with the settlement executed between the parties to this appeal, the town solicitor be directed to submit to the OLT for final approval the official plan amendment number 130 and the zoning bylaw amendment included as attachments number 3 and 4 respectively to this report, which have been finalized to the satisfaction of council. Can I have a motion to put this on the floor, please? The motion, Councillor Sherwood, seconded by? All right, I will second it. All right, we have it on the floor now. Just let me see what was the order here. We've got Deputy Mayor McIntosh, then Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Sherwood. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a real problem with anything to do with this development. I stated in the past that until this Hanson Boulevard goes through, I can't support anything to do with this particular development. These people deserve this road to go through. They waited long enough. I drive by it every day. I see nothing going on. I've heard for the last 3.5 years that I've been on council, it's coming, it's coming. So if there's anything for council to approve on this, I'll be voting against it because something needs to be done. Pressure needs to be put somewhere. I'm not sure where, but there needs to be pressure put somewhere. Thank you.
All right. Perhaps with that question or comment from council or for Deputy Mayor McIntosh, could we have a comment from either Mr. Ward or Mr. Koselak regarding the status of the road and bridge? Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, perhaps I'll speak to the land use aspect, and perhaps Mr. Koselak could speak to the timing of Hanson, the bridge crossing matter, and the future connection of the roadway. But with respect to the land use, we we understand that the completion of Hanson is a concern relative to this development. Notwithstanding that, they had a traffic engineering consultant look at this development and its impacts to the existing roadway, not only under current conditions, but under future conditions with Hanson connected. And what they found was actually that the development can be supported under existing conditions. And it's actually that when Hanson is connected, that's when you're going to see an overall increase of traffic activity in this location. So they did come to that conclusion that the development can be sustained under current conditions. However, notwithstanding that, we fully understand and appreciate the concern with this development moving forward under current conditions. And because of that, we agreed to a concept where the occupancy of the dwelling units would be restricted until Hanson's completed. So what that does is it would allow for the construction to eventually happen, notwithstanding there's still additional approvals, site development approvals that are needed. It would allow those approvals to unfold and allow construction to potentially get started, recognizing that it's not the actual construction activity that causes the traffic challenges, it's the occupancy of the unit. So what this would do with this land use approval is it would allow the site development process to continue. It would allow construction to potentially get started before eventually you have occupancy, and occupancy would be restricted until Hanson is connected. Now, notwithstanding all that, we know Hanson Creek Crossing connection is a priority, and I know Mr. Koselleck's got some details on how that's going to move forward in the near future.
So just for clarity, Mr. Ward, you're saying that you can put in the agreement legally binding that occupancy of the buildings can be restricted until such time as a connection is made. Is that what you're saying?
That's essentially correct, Your Worship. That's one of the parameters we've agreed upon in the settlement agreement with respect to this appeal. We did discuss or explore imposing that as a holding symbol removal item. However, we discovered that in order to obtain a building permit, you have to remove the holding symbol. So a condition requiring, hold up of occupancy wouldn't allow that construction to progress. Right.
So as I understand new building construction, there is an occupancy permit requirement and a final inspection of the building before occupancy is given, correct? Mr. Ward?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Koselleck, could you weigh in here, sir, on timelines here? I know Deputy Mayor expressed some frustration, as all of us have, on this connection that we've talked about since we came on to this council 3.5 years ago. So, sir, if you could update us, so we'd appreciate it.
Yes, happy to, Your Worship, and through you to the Deputy Mayor. I know this has been a priority for council, and staff have been pushing the construction of the bridge, which is the town's project. The project was broken into 2 phases. One was the clearing and grubbing to prepare for the actual bridge construction. That's been completed. And the second tender is about to be awarded. The contract is set out that the construction should be complete early fall. I don't have an actual date, but I would suggest it would be the September or October timeframe for completion and having the bridge available for use. I know one of the issues that we have less control over is the construction of the road that the developer is responsible for. We have had some communications with the developer's representative, and they are actually anxious to proceed with that particular phase. I know Mr. Ward has had some further conversations with them, and we're hopeful that after the bridge is completed, that the construction of the road will dovetail with the bridge construction, so that we don't have a bridge with no road.
A bridge to nowhere. Yeah.
Bridge to nowhere. So the work is progressing. It is like I say, in the process of the contract being awarded, and we anticipate completion of the structure, which isn't really a huge structure, early this fall.
Do we have any way to bind the developer in terms of timeline for building this road? I mean, can you speak to that, Mr. Koselleck or Mr. Ward?
Through your worship, it's the binding is really through the draft approval of the related plan of subdivision for the lands outside of the creek crossing. They have a time window. They have to satisfy those conditions in order to register the plan. And not only they're responsible for completing the works directly within the plan, but there's a segment of roadway right immediately adjacent to the plan. There's also a condition that they have to to fulfill to basically complete the entirety of that outstanding link of Hanson Boulevard. So there are time frames for them to bring that to fruition. Otherwise, they would lose their draft approval and have to start over essentially.
Well, I like what I've heard tonight about not being able to occupy the building until that road's built. That, to me, satisfies my concern. I don't know about the rest of council, but I think in that, thinking about the huge investment that developer's going to make, they're going to make sure that that other road is underway or certainly planned to be underway before they stick a shovel in the ground, I would expect. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess a little statement and a question, if I could. Like, I want to go out on a limb and say this is an election issue. This has been going on far too long. The previous election was about this as well. Even if the houses are in the ground, and Mayor Brown, you and I, lots of times we agree on these types of things, and I think it's a very pragmatic approach to say that that would be heavily influenced financially for them to make sure that they're working with us if the properties were in. However, it's also a symbol to the people in the neighborhood that these houses are in and the roads aren't in and the bridge isn't in, and it's been going on over 10 years, really. So I would suggest strongly that voting for this is an absolute wrong thing to do if you're intending to be on council next term. I just don't see how we can go ahead without having these other things done first. And if the builder really wanted to work with us, they would have these things done first prior to building the buildings. And I know there's a financial hit for everyone in this, but that's my position. And then I guess the official question would be to yourself, Mr. Ward, and that is, if we all vote no to this, what's the repercussions?
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, I guess just to clarify that the first point is that this particular development, it's not connected to the other developments that are more under the control of the completion of Hanson. So it is a sort of separate entity. It's more to the west of that subject area that the missing link is to be constructed. The second question of what happens if this wasn't to move forward, essentially we're at a decision-making point now where we're just refining the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendment instruments that are attached to the report before you. The decision about approval or acceptance of the development in principle has essentially already occurred by virtue of the tribunal proceedings and the settlement that was agreed upon amongst the parties. So the development approval, the land use approval that is in principle has materialized. We're really now at a decision-making point of determining is the official plan and zoning bylaw instruments appropriate to bring back to the tribunal for enactment and implementation.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. First of all, I want to provide a visual to council. If we go back to January 27th, 2020, our council chambers were full of people. So we have to visualize that tonight. If we were sitting in our council chambers, again, I'm quite confident that our council chambers would be full and overflowed. So that's a visual that I'd like to put in perspective in here. One of the biggest things I heard at that meeting was opening Hanson. I am very adamant that I don't want to see any more houses over there in that area. Houses bring more cars, bring more people, unless that street is open. So I'm very concerned with approving this because it makes it seem like I approve that, and I don't. Again, I'm visualizing all those people sitting out there looking at us as leaders and elected people and saying, you know what, like, we only have one way in and one way out. We need that road. This was a priority when I came on council 3 years ago and the rest of you. So, some things take so long time, but I don't want any houses which bring people and cars approved in any of that area until we get that road. The road's in, the bridge in, then we'll build. And my other concern is Mr. Ward, can you, sorry, I sound angered and I'm not angry. But Mr. Ward, by us approving this, are we also approving the height? Because I don't like the idea of these being 6 stories high. So we have another opportunity if this does go through to discuss about the heights of these buildings? Because they won't look nice in that neighborhood.
Mr. Ward.
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, yes, you would be approving the height. This has been a constant throughout the evolution of these applications. It's remained relatively constant. We do recall there being some concern about the height and density. However, when we look at this from a design standpoint, Hanson Boulevard in particular is a 30-meter wide cross section. And when you look at impact of height, you look at its proximity to adjacent developments and in terms of the spatial distance. One of the general rules in terms of determining an appropriate height magnitude is to look at its relationship to the width of the right-of-way. So you generally, for a medium density product such as this, you wouldn't want to exceed the width of the roadway. The height is 6 stories. It's certainly consistent with other developments we've experienced, and we have to remember that when we're trying to achieve greater densities and intensification throughout the town, density in this instance being a greenfield area, we want to make more efficient use of the land, and to achieve that means increased building heights and stories. So, and you want to orient that closer to your arterial roadways. In our opinion, this development fits that bill. It achieves those objectives, and it's an appropriate location for this sort of built form.
Just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, I respectfully, disagree only from the fact that if I drive around and I see, the approval of that 4-story building on Broadway down by Deja Vu Diner, I go look at the height of the building over on Spencer Avenue, and I look and think, oh, add a couple more stories over in that neighborhood. It doesn't look aesthetically appealing at all. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Post, and then Peters, and then McIntosh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo the comments of Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Taylor, and Councillor Sherwood, who have all expressed their frustrations with this development. And I think I'll speak for most of us on council that we all feel that way. And it is because of the visual that Councillor Sherwood provided us with. Is we've got residents in that area who are feeling unheard, who would be sitting in front of us in council chambers today begging us to not approve this development until Hanson is complete. And it's come to a point where, everybody's already expressed it. We've been on council for 3.5 years. We have made this a priority since day one. It's frustrating that we're still working towards it and that it's not done. I'm happy to hear that there's progress happening, but I feel like we're to a point where we have to hold developers more accountable to finishing the projects that we need them to do. And this is our opportunity to do that. I don't disagree that our community needs more housing. This is eventually going to be a great development to provide more housing. But we're not there yet. We don't have the infrastructure in place with that roadway to Hanson to make it happen. And we need to support the residents in that area by letting them know that we hear them, that we feel their frustrations, that we understand that they feel like they're on Orangeville Island right now, because that's what it feels like in that neighborhood. They're not connected to the rest of our community in any other way. In fact, they're almost driving to Amaranth to even access our community. And already feeling as though they're on the outskirts and only having one road in and out, we need to put pressure on the developers to make sure that that road is completed before this development is approved. And, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Ward, of the promise to zero occupancy or to limiting occupancy. But is that a promise to zero occupancy? Does that mean we're limiting it to no people will live there until that road is open? I think we need to make sure of those facts before we can approve this development. And at the time right now, I'm not feeling like I can vote in support of this development.
Mr. Ward, could you just answer Councillor Post there again, provide some clarity on the occupancy issue? Well, my understanding would be this is probably a 2 to 3 year build from this point forward in terms of when the building would actually be ready for occupancy. Are you able to put a stop on any occupancy of the building until that road is completed?
Certainly, Your Worship, and through you, the occupancy is limited by the settlement agreement that we've reached with the applicant. The specific occupancy restriction is 50%. So up to 2 of the 4 buildings may be occupied. The rest cannot be occupied until Hanson is fully completed. So it allows, again, the construction to get underway. And as noted, we anticipate that being, a couple years at least, let alone the additional site level approvals that would need to take place before that. So we do see this being a few years away yet before you're even at a state to contemplate occupancy. And having said that, it's a 50% restriction.
Is there anybody from Cache in this meeting, Mr. Ward, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, Your Worship.
Okay. All right, let's go with Councillor Peters. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm reaching the same conclusion as a variety of councillors, but I think it's maybe through a different pathway. And as I recall, when we discussed this development some time ago, there was debate about the employment land aspect and the ratio of commercial to residential. And on top of that, the number of residential units in that settlement area, according to the original values proposed. So, while I support the density and it being along a corridor and a potential bus route and all this thing, long term, I don't take exception with the development per se. But again, this tribunal ruling did not seem to bend towards any of what I felt to be the town priorities in terms of that land use mix. And so, I'm not ready to support it in that regard because, we're talking 1 floor out of 2 of the 4 buildings having some commercial occupancy. We continue to have this 98%, sort of residential split when we talk about these lands. And I'd rather see a greater degree of mixed use, and to go even further, if we start talking about the zoning and some of those aspects, the amount of parking proposed for a development of this size when we're trying to encourage transit and then being along a main corridor. There's a few things about this that I thought the ruling may come back a little more down the middle, but it seems that it aligns, completely with the developer's sort of proposal and mandate. And for those reasons, I really can't get behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Mr. Ward, if you could just comment on the employment land issue. County of Dufferin issued a report that came out of their municipal comprehensive review regarding employment land. And I think this was used, of course, by the developer and during the land tribunal hearing. Can you speak to that? Because it was a little puzzling to me, having lived in this town for 30 years and hearing, let's protect our employment land. Let's try and balance taxation and add, industrial, particularly employment land. And I was just, flabbergasted actually in January when that report came out. It said, yeah, you're good. You don't need any more. So can you speak to that, Mr. Ward?
Certainly, Your Worship, and through you. So that employment area question was key throughout our review of these applications. The lands are designated an employment area, albeit they are within a broader policy area defined by the overall Veterans Way community, which spells out some intricate policy framework for these lands. It does give some permissions for commercial uses, subject to zoning approvals and encouraging of residential above those commercial uses that may be introduced through site-specific zoning amendments. But notwithstanding that, we understood the balance of the policies permissive of an employment area function of these lands, and are mindful of the policy framework that says that if you're going to redesignate those lands for non-employment uses, you ought to do it through a comprehensive exercise. So we were hesitant to go down that road and give further consideration of these amendments until we started to see more insight coming out of the county through their comprehensive review exercise, which of course would determine the town's long-term employment area land use needs. Up until recently, that information hadn't quite come to fruition. So this is essentially why the applications were sort of going on through their process. However, very recently, we started to see this information from the county, and we had a report before you last meeting and another report on this evening's meeting summarizing that information thus far, which demonstrates, based on their very comprehensive analysis, that we appear to have a modest surplus of employment area lands and quite substantial needs for other land uses, residential and what they call community area employment, that being more institutional or commercial related jobs. So with that information, it became much more clear in the sense of our future employment area needs and gave us a little more to base support of these applications moving forward.
So I could just follow up, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I think the definitions kind of get strained here, because whether we're talking employment land, meaning industrial, or to Mr. Ward's point, community-based, commercial or employment institutional, there's a broad variety of land uses that would encourage jobs versus homes kind of thing. And again, I just think in this case, the stipulation in that Veterans Way settlement area that you can build above commercial is being stretched far too thin and goes beyond the intent, where you have, again, 5 stories above a single story of commercial and only in 2 out of the 4 buildings. So they've sort of squeezed in. I don't believe that lines up with the intent of the original clause in that settlement area. And so again, that's sort of the basis of my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's no secret how I'm going to vote. This may well be an election issue. I see it as a big safety issue as well. That's not being talked about tonight, but in my previous line of work, we did have some calls in that area, and it takes forever to get up there. It's not good enough. We talk about this building going to be taking a long time to be built, maybe 2 or 3 years. Well, then they can wait till September when the road goes in before I will give any approvals to it. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much. Sitting here patiently as all of my other fellow councillors have expressed their thoughts. I really appreciate the visualization that Councillor Sherwood provided, because I think all of us have received a number of calls over the last number of years from residents in that area, in particular the congestion, and I call it the infamous conga line trying to get out of Hanson onto Veterans Way, be that north and south. And that's another matter to the Deputy Mayor's point about the safety. I've always been concerned about how people can proceed out of that neighborhood without even having lights there. And that's another matter altogether, but that's something that needs to be looked at. I have concerns about the height. From a topography point of view, I'm very familiar with that area. And of course, the property that's just a little bit north of that development, or proposed development, I should say. And when we take a look at the height of that proposed development, it is going to be one of the highest locations visually that you would see because of the northwest section of the town. I just have a hard time. And I think the most important piece is, as was expressed, is the completion of the Hanson Bridge. That needs to be done before I'm going to approve anything regarding this agenda item. That is an absolute moving forward, Your Worship. So that's where I sit. Thank you.
Very good. All right, councillors. Let me just read this again. And that in accordance with the tribunal's approval in principle of the applications under appeal of the Ontario Land Tribunal, and consistent with the settlement executed between the parties as appeal, the town solicitor be directed to submit to the OLT for final approval the official plan amendment number 130 and the zoning bylaw amendment included as attachments number 3 and 4 respectively to this report, which have been finalized to the satisfaction of council. It sounds like the satisfaction of council issue is not there. And it sounds like we want to add in that any further approval here needs to be after the bridge and the road are built. So does anybody want to make a motion here to amend this and to push this forward? I've got Councillor Taylor with his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm just curious through you to Mr. Ward. I know you need a decision, sir, and I'm sorry we're frustrating you. And you do a great job, and I apologize if we're causing you issues. It's certainly not against you. We know you're well thought of for sure. I'm wondering if there's any potential to have this deferred, and the deferral idea would be, can we have Cache come and speak to us? Because surely if we could have a conversation in a public forum and this level of frustration is shared, surely we could come to an agreement in a public forum. Is there any way that they could do that, or is it just a yes, no tonight and we upset a relationship here?
Mr. Ward.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Taylor. We would certainly act whatever council's direction is. If council wishes to hear from the applicants, I'm sure they'd be willing to come forward and speak to council and perhaps answer any questions directly. From what I gather out of the discussions this evening, that the concerns are really around this in relationship to the timing of Hanson completion. We know that this is a very important priority. We know that we've got our efforts well underway to make sure this happens in a timely fashion. And we also are aware that the completion of Hanson, not only with respect to the town creek crossing project, but the remaining lands are under the realm of another development party. They're not, with respect to this particular developer. So we're very cognizant of that, and imposing the completion of one project by another party, imposing that on another developer party, it presents some challenges. And having said that, we also recognize that a land use approval is merely it's an important status in the overall development process. There's still some work to be done with site actually detailed design approvals and the actual construction. And we're trying to find efficiencies with respect to allowing that to unfold, as well as our construction efforts for the Hanson completion, and so that everything ideally lines up together, so that when residents are ready to occupy these buildings, Hanson's been completed, the buildings are substantially constructed, and everything can happen somewhat simultaneously. We find it perhaps less efficient to have Hanson done, and okay, now we can begin discussing a site plan design submission and approval process, which could take many months, and then an actual building permit submission and a construction process, which could take many years after. We don't see that as necessarily being overly efficient in timing and coordination, and we feel that this is an approach that meets many objectives.
Well, I see Deputy Mayor with his hand up. One quick question here before we go to Deputy Mayor, Mr. Ward. Edgewood Valley is the land to the east of the bridge. Is that correct? That's the name of that particular project?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
When did we approve that project? It's got to be close to 2 years ago, correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. If I recall correctly, it was perhaps about a year ago. And just so you and councillors are aware, they are advanced through their engineering design submission review process. They are quite far advanced. They've been working with staff very carefully on that, and we're expecting some advancement this year on that.
Can you clarify what that means, advancement? It sounds like we're looking for shovels in the ground here, Mr. Ward. Is there any kind of forethought here about when that's going to happen?
Sure, Your Worship. So the engineering submission is sort of the detailed design process. It's to get the shovels in the ground. Basically, they've got to have a detailed design as to where the pipes are going to go and how the roads are going to be constructed and so forth. So that's quite a detailed process that their engineers prepare, and it's vetted through our staff. And once that engineering design is approved to our satisfaction, then they can begin their site work. So as I mentioned earlier, they are very advanced in that design review process. So we'd expect, ideally, if we could get that review wrapped up and have them beginning their site work, sort of timing that to abut our creek crossing works, that's the overall objective.
All right, thank you. So we have a lineup of questions here. We've got Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Peters, and then Councillor Post. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to apologize to Mr. Ward because I'm sure we're not making his life any easier, but I hope he can feel the frustration with council. I can't get it in my head. If we ever had to evacuate that subdivision, we couldn't do it. We've got one way in, we've got one way out. Again, that's just part of my frustration with this whole thing. So, I apologize to Mr. Ward, but I can't approve anything even close to this because we've got to get this road in. We've got to get it in now. I don't even know why we have to wait till September. If we can put some pressure on them as town staff, as council, if we can do anything, we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ward, can you remind us, as you recall, in a variety of large-scale developments, we've asked for improvements to the energy and water performance of the building as part of sort of the negotiation of these developments. Do you know if that's being asked for on these buildings as well?
Mr. Ward.
Through your worship to Councillor Peters, this is something we've been applying to developments since this has been brought to us by yourselves for interest in moving forward. So we do expect to apply this to this development as part of the site plan design process.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make one further comment, which was to Mr. Ward. I appreciate your comments earlier about holding one development up because of work that another developer has to do, and I can definitely appreciate that. But from my perspective as a town councillor and as a community leader, we have a responsibility to build a community. And I think, to me, this isn't a punishment for Cache in any way, shape, or form, from me anyways. It's more about making sure that the community is developed at an appropriate pace. And I think at this point, by pushing forward this development without finishing the previous developments, I don't think we're doing any favors to building an appropriate community within that Veterans Way development.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Post. Councillor Peters, you have another question or comment, sir? No? To speak to Deputy Mayor's concern about safety, I remember a woman contacted me a couple of years ago whose father lived with her, had a heart condition. She was concerned about his welfare and that if he had an episode, that the ambulance station was literally 2 minutes from her house if the connection had been made, but otherwise it could be 10 minutes to get around to him. And that sunk in with me 2 years ago. It still resonates today. The connection to the rest of town for that particular pocket. And again, this, situation was not brought about by this council. All of that development was approved by previous councils. And, it probably should have been dealt with back then. I think, prior to that being opened up, I think it would have made sense for the councils in the past to have insisted upon Hanson being opened up. It certainly, from my understanding of real estate and development, I think it would have made sense to have 2 access points to open up to commercial retail section of town on First Street, and also is, again, from what Deputy Mayor has pushed tonight, was the safety aspect of being able to get in and out of that part of town. So, all right, folks. Well, listen, we've flogged this one tonight quite a bit. It seems like council's at the point where they don't wish to proceed any further with this development or approval of this development at this point. So I guess we need to agree here to maybe receive the report, but not to proceed any further, not to tell town staff to not proceed any further. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Worship. If I might perhaps suggest, if there's appears to be some reluctancy to move forward with the land use approvals at this time, given the relationship with Hanson completion, perhaps council may wish to defer the matter and direct staff to consider further with the applicant the arrangements around the timing of the Hanson completion relative to the advancement of this development.
All right, I will take your advice. Councillors, I see some nodding heads. I think Councillor Taylor had actually suggested a deferment of this. Do you have a timeline, Mr. Ward, to think of deferring this until some point in the future? Can you suggest something?
Your Worship, it's hard to pinpoint a time. I know the applicants are quite anxious to proceed and get something back in front of the tribunal to get this fully wrapped up, but understanding if, more certainty is needed with respect to the advancement of this land use approval relative to the Hanson completion, I'm sure they'll want to discuss it and have something back to you in pretty short order.
Okay, Councillor Peters, did you have a comment, sir?
Yeah, quickly, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do agree generally with the access arguments in the Hanson and the safety. I will, move to defer as well, but I would encourage councillors to think about the actual implications of the motion itself being the zoning and official plan amendment. So, to Councillor Sherwood's point about height, or if we're talking about things like the residential commercial mix, these are other aspects that are fundamental to the building itself rather than the Hanson aspect. So I would suggest we all come prepared for when the issue comes back to us to really know what we want to see from the development itself as a separate issue to the Hanson piece.
Right. So I think what we'd like to say, Mr. Ward, is we'd like to defer this matter. We would like to defer it until there's further clarity on the connection between Hanson West and Hanson East. And to Councillor Taylor's point, I think it's important to have the developer of the Cache property come before us again and talk about this development. So I guess that's my motion. Anybody want to second it? Councillor Post. Anybody want to amend that, the deferral? No? All in favor? All right, Mr. Ward, we will be talking in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on to 12.5. This is a discussion about the Dufferin County Draft Land Needs Analysis Report, a recommendation that report INS 2022-022. Town of Orangeville comments on the Dufferin County Draft Land Needs Analysis Report be received, and that staff be directed to submit the comments included as attachment number 2 to this report to the County of Dufferin regarding draft land needs analysis report findings and implications for the town of Orangeville. Mr. Ward, could you give us the Coles Notes version on this, sir, for the public's consumption?
Certainly, Your Worship, and through you. So this is in response to a draft land needs analysis report that was prepared by the County of Dufferin as part of their Municipal Comprehensive Review exercise, or MCR as we like to call it. So that's an exercise the county is undertaking to make sure their official plan is aligned with the latest provincial planning framework, that being the provincial growth plan and the provincial policy statement. Now, having said that, the county needs to update their official plan to provide some new direction for growth for a new planning horizon to 2051. So that involves looking at taking a lump sum growth allocation that's been given to the county by the province through the growth plan and dispersing that through local municipalities. And there's a land exercise undertaken to determine how that growth is to be allocated. It's mainly based on a principle of allocating the vast majority of growth to your settlement areas where you have services available and the infrastructure to support that growth. And it's also based on what's the land availability for municipalities, what is their servicing capacity to accommodate that growth. So it's sort of a reciprocal exercise, but above all, it's based on a fundamental approach of allocating to settlement areas and sort of a grow within before you grow outward model. So it gets down to more of a mathematical analysis to look at that growth regime. So the county has done that through their land needs assessment. They've made some recommendations so far as it relates to Orangeville, which we've highlighted in a report at the previous council meeting for consideration. A second element of this now going forward is the county's request for more formal comments from municipalities, including Orangeville. So the report is intending to present those comments to you before we take that back to the county's MCR consulting team for their consideration going forward. The comments are perhaps a little detailed, but we do have some observations on the analysis. We have some concerns about how some of the targets or projections were reached with respect to intensification, settlement expansions, and the composition of growth we're expecting in terms of the employment breakdown, residential targets, and so forth. So with that, I hope that gives a fair summary, and be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay. So, Councillor, can we have a motion here to put this on the floor? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any comments or questions of Mr. Ward here, Councillor? Seeing none, all in favor of this report and directing staff to move forward? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 12.6. This is the Emergency Response Plan 2021 CAO Report 2021-011. A recommendation that this report titled Emergency Response Plan 2021 be received, and the council pass a bylaw to adopt an emergency response plan and to repeal bylaw 05214. We have a motion to put this on the floor, please. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews, you wish to speak to this?
I do. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a comment on the importance of this document. I think for, a community of our size, no matter what the size of the community, I think it's imperative in these times that you have an emergency response plan. And I know that a lot of work has been coordinated not only with our municipality, but some of the other municipalities within Dufferin County. I appreciate all the work that has gone into it, because it's important that you have a logistic playbook to determine when you have a pandemic, when you have a tornado, when you have other issues that occur. I'm also appreciative to see something that's close to my background, which is in fact the search and rescue, which I was really pleased to have that initiated a number of years ago in my previous portfolio. So I think that the comment that I have is that I'm glad to see that something like this is in place. I know that, again, heaven forbid some of these things having to be put into to action, but it's imperative in these times that we have that. I do have a question, and I'm not sure if this would be something I can certainly ask offline, but I do recall that the fire station at one point, and maybe our deputy mayor would recall this, there was a siren at that location that would in fact be loud enough that the town could hear that there was something going on. And we're not talking about the fire trucks themselves, but I do recall that type of sound device that was there. Deputy Mayor, you might be able to provide, maybe just an overview on that, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, we had an unfortunate incident at 3 o'clock in the morning once with the siren stuck on, and a previous mayor asked us to get rid of it, which we did.
Yeah.
The problem being, every time that siren goes, nobody knew what it was for. It was actually to warn the public that volunteers were trying to get to the hall. But then some people said, well, it'd make a good tornado warning. Well, how do they know it's a tornado warning and not the volunteers getting to the hall? There was so many different things it could be. So it ended up being, basically nothing we could use. So it was taken away.
And the technology has allowed us to be a lot more advanced and quicker to, getting that whatever the message is to the general public. So it was just a piece that I recall from a number of years ago hearing, but that's all I had to say, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. So we have a motion on the floor to pass a bylaw to adopt this emergency response plan and to repeal bylaw 05-2014. All in favor? Thank you, councillors. Moving on to 12.7. This is a report on new businesses in Orangeville for the period December 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. And the recommendation that this report dated March 1st be received. Can I have a motion to receive this report, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Post. Any comments? Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Just quickly, Your Worship, I sound like a broken record sometimes when this particular item comes up, but I'm always enamored by those who are committing to start a new business. Many members of council are aware of a number of these businesses that have already been underway, but again, I applaud them for investing in our community.
Agreed. Very good, sir. Thank you. All in favor? All right. Moving on to 12.8, this is the community grant allocations for 2022, and it's a recommendation that report CPS 2022-013 dated March 7th. Community grant allocations be received, and the council approved the distribution of the 2022 community grant budgeted funds of $56,000. Can we have a motion to put this on the floor? Councillor Sherwood, second by Councillor Post. Any comments on this, councillors? All right, all in favor of approval? Very good, thank you. Moving on to 12.9, the delegation of authority restricted acts. This is CPS-2022-008. A recommendation that report, delegation of authority, be received and that a bylaw be passed to temporarily provide the ability to conduct certain business in the event of council being restricted in its authority pursuant to Section 275 of the Municipal Act. Could we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any comments or questions, councillors, on this item? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 12.10, that is the election sign bylaw amendment, CPS 2022-016. There's a recommendation that this report, the election sign bylaw amendment, be received and the council pass a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-003. We have a motion on this, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any questions on this, councillors? All in favor? Very good. All right, 12.11 is 2022 municipal election information report, CPS 2022-018. Recommendation the report 2022 municipal election information be received and that bylaw 2021-038, a bylaw to authorize the use of optical scanning vote tabulators and a vote at home program in the 2022 municipal and school board election be amended. Could we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, perhaps we could just have an explanation of the vote at home program.
I'm going to call on Deputy Clerk Carolina Kahn. Deputy Clerk, over to you.
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sherwood. So the Vote at Home program is going to be at a program that we want to establish to allow those that have accessibility issues or mobility issues and are not able to attend a voting location to request to the clerk's office that an election official attend their residence so that they can be administered a ballot. They'll be given an opportunity to make their selections, and then those votes will be counted towards the general tabulation. So the Vote at Home program will happen during the advanced voting dates, which will soon be published. But yeah, it's essentially a program that will be available to those who have issues getting to a voting location.
Thank you very much for explaining that. I just wanted clarification that people didn't know that it doesn't mean you can vote online or mail it in, that you're actually physically having an election staff member go to that person's home and then securely put it in a secure ballot box.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's exactly right.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, all in favor? Thank you. All right, moving on to bylaw enforcement services. This is a recommendation that reports CPS 2022-017 bylaw enforcement services be received, and the council pass a bylaw to authorize the entering into of an agreement with the Township of Melancthon regarding the provision of bylaw enforcement services, and that council pass a bylaw to authorize the entering into an agreement with the Township of Mulmer regarding the provision of bylaw enforcement services. Can we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews, you have a question.
I do, Your Worship. I like the idea of supporting our peripheral municipalities with the expertise that our bylaw department has. But as we all know, that costs have gone up regarding fuel. And I'm wondering, has there been consideration not only for the cost of fuel, wear and tear on vehicles, the town's vehicles, as much as it's only 20 hours per month. I know it is time where vehicles will be driving to those municipalities to support the bylaw requests. So I'm not sure who would be responsible for providing maybe a response to that question.
Pretty sure cost recovery is part of this, but I'll let.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Clerk,
just wanted to make sure.
Yes, I can confirm that all costs are recovered for the delivery of this service.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, if there's no further questions, councillors, all in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Moving on to 12.13, salt storage building additional funding requirement. Recommendation that reports CMS 2022-006 salt storage building additional funding be received, and that the council approve the additional funds of $353,533 from general reserves and development charges towards the salt storage building project based on the following funding scenario. Borrow $100,000 from DC reserves for roads and finance the remaining from $253,533 from general capital reserves. Can we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. I see Mr. Osmond has lit up his screen. Mr. Osmond, could you give us some further explanation, please?
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you. I guess I have the unenviable task of bringing in a report where we're over. But unfortunately, you know, when you look at the environment these days, one is never shocked. But I have been shocked by this, the broad range of bids from our low bid of 1.3 million essentially up to 3.7 or $8 million is kind of really strange. But when you do the math and you look at all the breakdowns, it's even stranger because they're really all over the place. And when I do my due diligence and talk to all the bidders and what they're looking at, it comes down to a couple of different things. We're seeing a huge increase since January, even in February, in the concrete industry of 30+% increase. We're seeing increase in the steel industry of 40+%. We're seeing increase in labor right across the board. And when I sat down, quite frankly, I sat down with the low bidder and did a lot of discussion with the low bidder on trying to ensure that we had everything lined up and things are going to work the way we want it to work, and we're going to get a product. You know, it really came down to, you know, one bidder trying to get a job and keeping things as lean as possible. And it's very difficult to come to grips with the fact that we have an environment that's changing more rapidly than over a 10 to 15 day period, if I could. And that's what I've been seeing, and that's what I've been experiencing, or we've been experiencing. Everyone in the, given we're taking on a lot of big construction projects, we've been lucky in some cases. In some other cases, we've not been so lucky. In the case of the salt storage, if I could, it's got a little bit of history. The storage dome itself, the salt storage dome itself, right now, we had a structural engineer do analysis, do a conditional analysis on it, and quite frankly, we can't salvage it. So there is no question on whether or not it has to be decommissioned or demolished. It has to be. I'll give you an example if it makes it any more palatable. There's hundreds of these salt domes across this province just getting removed and demolished because of years of construction, and because they've experienced a lot of problems with the way they were constructed and over time they've deteriorated. The other thing we're seeing with these domes is that when you're, in the new source water protection legislation, in the history would be that you would dump all this salt in your yard and then you would bring it inside the dome. That can't happen anymore. You have to make sure that your salt is actually dumped inside of your storage shed or storage structure. In this case, this structure is designed so that a semi truck can go inside and dump the salt inside the dome or inside the structure, if you would. So it is larger. It does take up to 10,000 tons. Right now, we're getting around 5,000 tons. Orangeville's over a season will use 10,000 plus tons. When you're in the market like we are these days and a changing market, I think there's a huge advantage to that. I think if you can order your 10,000 tons, get it all delivered in August and early September, and have it in your shed, then you're not going to worry about fluctuation in the market come middle of winter. So that helps as well. But I think in overall scheme of things, the price point is a good price, even though it's higher than we had budgeted. It is a good price in terms of what you're going to get for your dollars, and it will give you a structure that will be warranted for at least 20 years. The actual, if you would, the membrane on the top of the structure. And after 20 years, and some last longer, by the way, you'll have to replace just the membrane. Everything else is good to go.
Very good, sir. Thanks for the recap. Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Peters.
Yes, Your Worship. I don't know how the others feel, but to get a capital project that's been on the books for 9 years tidied up would be nice, because, a 9-year capital project. My thought is had we done this 9 years ago, we wouldn't be asking for extra money, but ultimately you could be sitting here in front of us saying, hey, that didn't work and now we got to demolish and start from scratch. So, there's two ways of looking at that. But my biggest thing is a 9-year capital budget. It's gone on too long. So my thought is within the borrowing, and you know how vocal I've been about not using reserves, but in this particular case, this is exactly what reserves are for, as far as, the structural replacement of infrastructure, etc. But I see we're pulling for two reserves. One's from DCs and one's from general capital. And I'm just wondering, what is the rationale for how much we're taking out of DCs and compared to general? Can we flip that by any chance, or can we up more out of the DC reserves? I know it's all one pot in the overall scheme of things, but just wondering the rationale for the math.
Madam Treasurer or Mr. Osmond?
Well, I'll leave that to Madam Treasurer. Thank you.
Through your worship, to Councillor Sherwood. So this was a DC recognized project, and we have exhausted the funding that was allocated by our existing DC study. So borrowing 100,000, meaning we will recoup or replenish that with our next study. The reason we came out with this particular ratio is because it, at one hand, allows a little bit of reprieve with the general reserve, but at the same time, we are not spiking up our next DC study. So hence the ratio. So it helps us a little bit with the 353, but not to the point that we now have to recoup 250 or 300 for that matter with the next study.
Okay.
So it sort of strikes a balance. There is no perfect math, but it strikes a balance.
I just kept visualizing that we have more opportunity to take it from DCs than general. So that's just a thought. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood and Madam Treasurer. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Osmond or perhaps Mr. Koselak. I remember a couple of years ago describing and having a discussion about moving more towards brine for treatment, salt treatment during the winter. Obviously, our traditional salt tonnage is based on the traditional method of distributing that salt. And I wonder if we're getting into a spot where we're doubling the size of our capacity, and maybe a few years from now, we're actually cutting that capacity as we perhaps move to a brine solution. Has there been any thought about that? Obviously, I want to see this project get finished as well, as Councillor Sherwood said, but I would hate to overbuild if we think we're moving to a reduction strategy.
Mr. Koselak.
Yeah, through your worship, it's a good question. We, in my former position in Peel, we did use brine in some circumstances. So brine was actually quite good early in the year when you were pre-wetting the roads and trying to keep the snow and ice from actually adhering to the asphalt. And it was also quite good in sort of pre-wetting bridges and that sort of thing. It wasn't the predominant salt that was used. Most of the salt that was used, even in Peel, that had the brine making facilities, was granular salt. And I would suggest in Orangeville, it is something we're looking at, but I would suggest in Orangeville, we just wouldn't use enough brine to make a brine making facility cost effective. But that said, it is an exercise I want to go through and satisfy myself that that's the case. But my gut feeling is that we aren't big enough. We don't have enough sort of pre-wetting opportunities to make an actual in-house brine making facility cost effective. And even if we did go to brine, we would still, in my opinion, need 90 or 95% of the salt dome capacity anyway for the granular salt. That's where the salt comes from to make the brine.
Fair enough. Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Peters and Mr. Koselleck. All right, any further questions on this item? All in favor? All right, thank you, councillors. Moving on to correspondence, we have two items of correspondence, one from Township of East Scariffraxa regarding very interesting industrial subdivision that they're planning. You know, I know Ms. Phillips of our Economic Development Department is, you know, receives phone calls regularly, people asking and looking for land to develop businesses on, build industrial buildings. So this parcel of land in East Scariffraxa is zoned business park. There's a wide variety of industrial uses and other uses that are available. So it's a good thing for our local economy that subdivision is going to come online. So looking forward to seeing that. And the other item is Town of Mono, a letter to the Prime Minister regarding support for Ukraine. Of course, we're all horrified by what's going on over there, and we certainly support Town of Mono's thoughts on that. So could we have a motion to receive these two pieces of correspondence, please? Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Taylor. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Taylor. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, to Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Taylor first.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, sir. I just wanted to speak to item 13.1, and I am grateful that East Scariffraxa is doing that. They have the land to be able to have these employment lands come forth. I think it makes absolute sense. It's confusing to Orangevillians when they see that, though. They wonder who's making these decisions, and because it's so close to our border, it actually does have implications for us. But I guess I just want everyone to know there's nothing that we can do about that. We don't get consulted. That's their land. That's their property. They can do as they wish with it. I do think it's a good thing. However, I mean, there is going to be traffic implications for that as we go forward, and especially as you're traveling along that road. I've had the great pleasure of traveling along Broadway at about 8:30 in the morning for quite some time now, and it's very busy. So it will be busier. I guess, Your Worship, my only point is I just want the town of Orangeville to know that this decision isn't made by this group of people. It's made by another group of people, and we don't have any influence over it.
Right. That land has been zoned that way for quite some time. And I guess the landowner now wants to bring it online and put roads in and make it available. So I think, Councillor Taylor, you mentioned driving out west of here along Fergus Road. It's certainly going to impact traffic on Fergus Road as well. So
well, I wish it was in the town of Orangeville. It's such a sad thing.
Yep, agreed. Okay, Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to speak to the next item on the correspondence, and I do want to thank the municipality of Mono for their letter. I am just wondering, I know that we're already into the unfortunate time of a month into this activity in the Ukraine. I'm wondering if it would be something that would be under consideration to also send a very similar letter on behalf of council in the town.
Yeah, I think it couldn't hurt. Councillor Andrews, we were quick out of the gate to support you.
I know we were.
Yes. You did a very nice job of emceeing that event that was held recently. Of course, we lit up our town hall in the yellow and blue of the Ukraine flag. And again, as I said, we're all horrified by what's going on over there. But if you'd like to put a motion on the floor, perhaps for staff to craft a similar letter to Prime Minister Trudeau and others, I think it would be supported by council. So Councillor Andrews has a motion on the floor. Does somebody wish to second that? I see Deputy Mayor has his hand up. Any further comments on that particular item before we vote on directing staff to prepare a letter in support of Ukraine? No? All in favor? Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to circle back to the application in East Garifraxa and just make a comment that yes, we don't get the privilege of having that tax base in Orangeville, but in actual fact, we will benefit from that because those industries will be contributing to the Dufferin County budget, and that ultimately would help hopefully reduce some of the funds required by our taxpayers. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely, and there'll be more jobs created in our local area. Working close to home is a good thing. So hopefully there'll be lots of job opportunities for people in Orangeville when that subdivision does get fully developed. All right, we had a motion on the floor to receive those two pieces of correspondence. All in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on to, I know 14.1 was withdrawn. So we're on to notice of motion prior to meeting. This is from Councillor Peters regarding fare free transit. Councillor Peters, do you wish to speak to this?
Briefly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this is just a follow-up to the conversation we had last meeting regarding fare free transit and having staff come back with how that pilot program might take shape so that we can have a better understanding before we make a decision.
Very good. Deputy Mayor, did you wish to speak to this, or you're still lit up?
I just wanted to say I kind of spoke out against it last time. I certainly do support this. I'd love to see free transit. I believe we talked about it last meeting. It was about $180,000 loss for the town of Orangeville taxpayers. However, if it can be made up through the gas tax, which I hear that it goes by ridership, I would certainly be in favor of this. So I just want to go on record and say I support this. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So, councillors, I guess we have a motion on the floor here. Does somebody wish to second this? Deputy Mayor? Any further questions? Councillor Taylor, you have your hand up, sir.
I just wanted to state again, being fair to Councillor Peters with great respect, I certainly vote in favor of the research. We should always do that and follow through. But as I sit here now, I don't see why we would give $180,000 of tax. I think it was actually $166,000 of taxpayer dollars. I don't know why we would do that. However, hey, if with more information, maybe I'll change my mind. And so for that, I'll certainly vote in favor of it. And certainly out of respect for Councillor Peters. Sure what's happening there. I don't know where that's coming from, but it's terrible feedback.
Yeah, Councillor Taylor, it's a lot of. I'm getting feedback too. Sorry. It is a lot of money, but in the context of what we just approved, which is $350,000 for a salt dome, public transit is something that's important to a lot of people that need it. Those do not have a car, seniors, and so students seem to use it a lot. So I think it would be very interesting to get a report back from staff, and I appreciate Councillor Peters pushing this forward to let us get, as you say, Councillor Taylor, more information to review. All right, so we have this on the floor now. Any further comments or questions? No? All in favor? Thank you, Councillor Peters. Any notices of motion at meeting? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Myself and Councillor Taylor have been reached out by business regarding the patios. And I'm going to put forward a motion tonight, and I'm hoping we can waive notice and vote on that this evening. Basically, the current bylaw states that patios can be open from May 1st until August 31st, or I could be, or maybe September 30th.
October.
Sorry. No, September 30th. So at this point, some of the businesses are hoping to have the patios open April 1st to November 30th, much like we did the 2 years during COVID. I'm very much in support of that because we don't know how the patios are going to be affected in the fall with the sidewalk construction. So, you know, it could cut into that. But if I could perhaps read the motion so that they can, my councillors can see my intention here, and then we can, I'm open to some dialogue here. So
go ahead.
If I could please, that council pass bylaws amending the outdoor boulevard cafe and the display of merchandise bylaws for the period of April 1st to November 30th, 2022, to align with the extensions approved in 2020 and 2021, and that planning staff be directed to amend the outdoor boulevard cafe and display of merchandise applications and permits accordingly, and that throughout the 2022 season, staff monitor and evaluate the impact of the extended locations on downtown parking, and that staff report to council in February of 2023 with respect to permanently extending the outdoor boulevard cafe and display of merchandise bylaws effective April 1st to October 31st on an annual basis.
Very good. Does somebody wish to second that? Councillor Taylor. Any further comments on this notice of motion? And I guess we need to vote on waiving notice in order to get this approved tonight. Could we have a notice or a motion to waive notice? Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Andrews. Let's vote on that first, waiving notice. And then we have Councillor Sherwood's seconded by Councillor Taylor, the motion to extend the patio season from April 1st, no fooling, to November 30th this year, with staff reporting back in February 2023. All in favor?
Well, there's discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Comments? I'm sorry. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Peters. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
You're muted, Todd.
I was hoping to be unmuted before you told me I was muted. Thank you very much. We, my family and I actually were on a patio this past weekend in Orangeville, and it's just, honestly, it's just nice to be out and about. And I think my worry and concern is the businesses overall. I want to be as open as I can, and I know we all do, to helping them be successful. And if this, in some small way, does so, I think we should. And I think there's some bent up energy to have the public be out and about. So like St. Patrick's Day was a lot of fun in town this past weekend, and there was room for spillover onto those patios. Anyway, whether or not you're going to sit outside in the cold, that's up to you, but at least there's an option available for everybody, and those businesses feel like they're heard. And the last thing I just want everybody to consider is this season is going to be short because unfortunately we have to rip our sidewalks up. So, you know, anything we can do to help is my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Fortunately, that sidewalk is going to be staged as was planned, and hopefully the disruption will be restricted to, you know, small areas at a time, as was discussed when we approved that budget item. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I certainly appreciate the gist of the motion. I would ask through you to Mr. Koselak, because obviously the boundaries of the patio season are mostly related to snow removal, as I understand it. And while we seem to be out of the woods in that regard, I think a blessing from infrastructure services is worthwhile. And then just before we get comment from him, I'd be in favor of simplifying the motion to just the opening date and understanding the construction situation a little better and assessing the fall. Again, if we're expected to have a blast of a fall, I don't want to be competing with the other activities along Broadway, including snow removal or construction or whatnot. So for simplicity, I'd like to keep it to, just discussing the opening date, but obviously open for more conversation in that regard.
All right, Mr. Koselleck, do you have any comments on snow removal issues?
Yeah, through your worship, it's a great question. We're certainly supportive of the boulevard cafes. There's mechanisms in the, in the bylaw and the guiding documents that we can have things moved if there's a major snow event. We have to get in there to clean it up. We don't anticipate any particular issues. And on the other, I think, comment you made, your worship, we are planning to stage the brick work on Broadway and try and limit the actual area of disruption as much as we can, because this, I think I've said it, it will be a disruptive process, but we don't want it to be disruptive on all of Broadway, and we're going to try and stage, the section be west of First Street first, because that one doesn't have any boulevard cafes, and then try and move along block by block.
Very good, thank you.
From an infrastructure services perspective, we certainly respect and support the outdoor boulevard cafes, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate them and work around them.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, do you want to speak again, or you just have your hand up? You do? No, you're good. Okay. Councillor Peters, you suggested maybe restricting this to the opening only. Councillor Sherwood, do you have any comment on that?
I would like my motion to stay as I've presented it, please.
Okay. All right. So
if I could just ask
yes,
through you, Councillor Sherwood. I guess what I was going for was trying to understand the situation in the fall a little better, and maybe you could elaborate on staff's role in your discussion. Like how are staff supposed to assess changes in parking and things like that and reporting back next year? I'm not sure what we're asking them to do and what information we're going to get from them that'll be useful, especially with the construction happening. It seems like it would be an anomaly of a year, right?
That's true, but we have to give the opportunity to see if there's feedback from the public complaining that they can't find parking because of the actual patio itself and not necessarily the reconstruction. I think it's just a due diligence that we collect data and be able to substantiate or support whether this is something we want to do permanently.
Right, and I would suggest, Councillor Sherwood, you're our representative on the BIA. I think you should probably in one of your meetings mention this to BIA members and let them direct any complaints or positive comments to town staff or through the general manager of the BIA to town staff on this.
And I absolutely will. I should have mentioned at the beginning before I presented my motion that this was lengthily discussed at our BIA meeting last week, because that business owner had come also reached out to the BIA, and the BIA is very supportive of this as well. But I know that we definitely can provide communications to our members through many means of correspondence and communication.
All right. Any further comments, councillors, before we vote on this? All right. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Any further notices of motion? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just wanted to kind of pre-warn everybody that the Deputy Mayor and I are working together on a police board follow-up, and it's just going to be about the false alarms. We have our information available. I'll make sure it's on the document, an aligned notice of motion regarding those false alarms for our next meeting. Thank you.
Also, I want to make a comment that I'm going to bring forward a motion at the next meeting as well. This is regarding funding for police bicycle patrol. Request from Inspector Ward for the purchase of a couple of bicycles. I understand that OPP is going to be training, and he's looking for a little bit of funding. I think bicycle patrols are a good thing. It allows officers to interact with the community a little bit better, get into some laneways and things that they don't normally get into. And, you know, I've seen it in many other municipalities. It seems to work extremely well. So we'll be bringing something forward at the next council meeting on that item. I think that's it. New business, folks. Is there any new business councillors like to mention? Councillor Post, go ahead. And then Councillor Taylor, or sorry, Andrews.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring to Council's attention that today, March 21st, is marked every year as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Now, the theme for this year is Voices for Action Against Racism, and the reason for the theme is to highlight the absolute importance of strengthening meaningful action towards combating racism. And for us as municipal leaders, I think it becomes that much more powerful because we have the ability to use our voice and our platforms to affect much needed change towards an equitable and inclusive community. So I do want to use this moment today to ask for a recommitment from all of you to this important work. And I think you guys have been extremely supportive so far. But with that said, I'm going to use this for a shameless plug as well. Our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee has launched a survey. We are asking community members to share their experiences in Orangeville with racism, with discrimination, with inclusion in general. And the purpose for the survey is to provide us with the data that we need so that we can move forward and create a really meaningful Orangeville-specific plan of action to create a much more inclusive Orangeville. So tonight I'm asking everyone, council, town staff, and residents watching tonight, just take a moment. It does take about 10 or 15 minutes to complete the survey. I did send it to all of council members through email. And also, if there's anybody in the community that you think would benefit from providing their input, please use your networks and share that widely so that we can get as much data going forward to make the best plan for Orangeville possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. And as we are talking about EDI, again, absolutely delighted to be part of the EDI committee with my fellow Councillor Lisa Post as chair, myself as co-chair. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who participated in the first Holy Festival Celebration of Colors that we had this past Friday. I want to thank Deputy Mayor McIntosh as well as Councillor Post and many others in our community who came out to recognize a very special day. Again, it was embraced by many in our South Asian community. And more importantly, I think many people who did drop by saw something very unique and one that I think that is kind of the seed of more to come in the coming years. So again, the last point is that we do have some of the friendship rocks that many of our community children through their elementary school teachers ended up creating, and those are in the town atrium until the 31st. And again, I want to thank OPL, the Orangeville Public Library, and many other staff who ended up taking time to support this particular event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other new business, councillors? Okay, I've been asked to go back by Clerk's Department to 1213, that the salt storage building funding request. Does anybody remember who the mover and seconder was on that particular item? I know we voted unanimously. Councillor Andrews, you're muted, sir. You're muted, Councillor Andrews.
There we go. I was the seconder.
Does anybody recall who? It was unanimous. So how about Councillor Sherwood? Councillor Sherwood made the motion and Councillor Andrews seconded it. Thank you, councillors. All right, moving on to question period. Ms. Pormancherry or Clerk's Department, do we have anybody on the line?
Through your worship, there's no one currently on the line.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to 19. These are bylaws 19.1 through 19.9. I'm not going to read them all, but we have a motion to read 3 times and pass these bylaws, please. Council or Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. Any questions, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Worship. 19.7 in regards to face coverings. I just wanted to let council know I was in one of our local big box stores this afternoon. I guess we only have one big box store in town. I would say 90% of the people in that store were wearing face coverings. So I found that quite interesting, even though today was the day you didn't have to. So it was interesting.
It's certainly understandable. You know, we're hearing reports from other parts of the world that this problem is not over. And I think those who are wearing masks should be respected. I hope that it's a choice that many people will make and that we will support whatever choice is made out there by members of the public and also by business owners for that matter. All right, so we've got this motion on the floor to read 3 times and pass these 9 bylaws. All in favor? Thank you. One more motion to adjourn. Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Post. All in favor? All right. Thank you, folks. Have a nice evening.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.